everyone, this is Maxine for Jetset Extra, and I'm here today with Seth Camille, founder of Big Onion Walking Tours.
Good morning and welcome to Greenwich Village.
Thank you.
This is probably one of the greatest neighborhoods in New York. You know, I always say that everybody thinks they know the Village, but nobody really does. And we're starting here in Washington Square Park, in front of the Centennial Arch, built 1895 to commemorate the centennial of George Washington's inauguration. And believe it or not, this is not the first arch. The first one actually was across Fifth Avenue, built 1889. This is built a few years later in 1895 and designed by the great New York architect, Stanford White. But did you know that while we're standing here in front of the arch in this incredible park, we're actually on top of one of the largest cemeteries in the country?
No.
Yeah, we're standing,
here?
yeah.
Okay.
We're standing on the bones of between 10 and 12,000 people.
Wow.
This used to be Potter's Field. Imagine nothing around us. And in the early 18th century, we began depositing bodies here.
Just one on top of the other?
One on top of the other, no gravestones. And by the 1830s, when we're building the beautiful mansions around us and New York University is just becoming a founded wonderful school, we begin to sort of cover it over. And now they're here underneath our feet and they're being undisturbed by all the renovations around us.
Wow. So Seth, you know I'm a total walking tour nerd. I did the Marais in Paris, I did Jack the Ripper in London, and when I came to New York last month, I wanted the best walking tour in New York City, looked it up on the internet, and everyone said you're the best.
Well, thank you.
So I loved the eating tour we did, which is exactly where, I forget.
The multi-ethnic eating tour travels through Chinatown, Little Italy, and the Jewish Lower East Side. Now, believe it or not, those neighborhoods are just 15 minutes away.
That blows me away.
Let's go.
Okay.
Maxine, I brought you to McDougall Alley. It is one of those hidden little secrets in Greenwich Village. This, obviously private and gated, multi-million-dollar homes.
These are multi-million-dollar homes?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Today, they're beautiful, a lot of artist lofts, but if you look closely, you'll see that they're actually former carriage houses.
Okay.
One of the great ironies of New York is that housing is very expensive. And bring someone back from the dead from the 1850s, and they'll look at this and say, in my day, this is fit for nothing more than a horse and a wagon. What are you doing living here? On this alley, Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney created a small collection of artists and a small collection of painters and their works that ultimately became the Ashcan School. This alley was where the Whitney Museum of American Art was born. She amassed more than 600 paintings by the 1920s and tried to donate them to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, who said, "We don't show the art of living Americans." She grabbed her collection, left, and now the Whitney rivals the Metropolitan for being one of the great New York City art museums.
And the Whitney was born here?
Whitney was born here, then moved over to West 8th Street, and then a series of other places, and now their modern home on Madison in the 70s. So Maxine, are you a rock and roll fan?
Of course.
You can't come to New York and not think about rock and roll. This little storefront at 52 West 8th Street is Electric Lady Studios. Jimi Hendrix opened this in 1970.
Wow.
It's hard to believe. He only played here about a month before he took off for Europe and what became his fatal trip. But this is like the place to come. The Rolling Stones have recorded here. We've got Bob Dylan recording here. You name a group, they recorded here. There is a tremendous amount of rock and roll history in New York. For a lot of musicians, this is the place that you come to when you want to find an audience. And Greenwich Village was a place with clubs where you could just sort of play and maybe get discovered. And don't forget, 4 blocks from here was the club where this girl from Brooklyn did this weird show and ultimately becomes Lady Gaga. You got this young guy, Bobby Zimmerman, comes to New York from the Midwest. He plays a couple of gigs on McDougall Street. He does a little bit with Joan Baez. Lo and behold, Bob Dylan is born. He's been playing 40 years.
Wow.
He records here.
Still, to this day.
To this day. This place is it. This is one of my favorite buildings in New York. It's a little hard to see because of the scaffolding, but this is the 1876 Jefferson Market Courthouse, the trial of the 20th century. the murder trial of Harry K. Thaw. This street was filled in 1909 with hundreds of journalists. There's no television, there's no radio, good old-fashioned print. Harry K. Thaw, the deranged son of a Pittsburgh industrialist, kills the great architect Stanford White in Stanford White's Madison Square Garden.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Was it over a woman?
It was over a woman. It was over the fact that Stanford White, who had a thing for young girls, when he was in his 30s, had an affair with the teenager Evelyn Nesbit. Later, Harry K. Thaw marries Evelyn Nesbit. On their honeymoon, finds out that she was not a virgin, that she had been with Stanford White, and literally beat her across Italy. They come back. Harry K. Thaw sees Stanford White in his owner's box at Madison Square Garden, goes up and in front of a crowd screams, "You ruined my wife," and shoots him and kills Stanford White. Trial takes place here. What happens? Hung jury. Classic America, hung jury in a major trial. The defense, they go back at him. Guilty by reason of insanity the second time around, dementia Americana. It is acceptable for a husband to be made momentarily insane when he sees the man who took his wife's virginity. Only in America.
Only in America.
Come on, let's go this way.
Salacious. What's next?
Maxine, this is Gay Street, one of the great hidden small alleys in Greenwich Village.
I'm from West Hollywood, so is it named for LGBT community?
It is not. If I had $1 for everyone that thought, oh, it's named for the gay and lesbian history of the village, I wouldn't work anymore. It's named for and by Sidney Howard Gay, 1830s abolitionist and newspaper man. At the time, if you wanted to vote in New York, you had to own $200 worth of real property.
What constituted real property?
Real property for $200 is basically a house.
Wow.
So he took part of his land and divided it up into these houses and sold them at discount or at low mortgages to African Americans, creating the largest African American voting body in the city of New York right here on the street. Now we have a different voting system. It's based on age and citizenship. For a while, women couldn't vote, but at this period, it was purely about economics.
Wow. So Gay Street.
Gay Street.
Okay, what's next?
What's next does have to do with gay and lesbian history, the Stonewall Inn.
Let's do it.
All right, Maxine, June 28th, 1969, two important historic events happened. What were they?
I don't know.
You don't know. Okay, we're gonna start with the incredible one. It was the day that Judy Garland was buried. Some say that affected the second one, the Stonewall Uprising. This is the Stonewall, one of the most famous and important gay and lesbian bars anywhere in the world. It was a carriage house, it was a restaurant, that all was the prehistory. In 1969, it was illegal to dance in bars.
Really?
It was.
Okay.
In fact, it still is.
Really?
You cannot dance in bars without a cabaret license.
Okay.
That night, June of '69, police officers come in to shut down the Stonewall, officially because of dancing, really to harass gays. You have a crowd forming on the sidewalk, and the police get penned in inside. So now you've got police officers penned in the bar with the gay and lesbian community out front throwing rocks and shoes and everything else. A riot breaks out. Fighting took place every night for about 5 nights.
So 5 nights of fighting here.
5 nights of fighting, start here, and it spreads. This is argued to be the birthplace of the East Coast gay rights movement. We are people, we are equal. Do not abuse us because of who we are. What I love is that the Stonewall Inn. When have you ever heard of a riot or a rebellion that had a better name than the Stonewall Uprising? I mean, it just works. In the 1930s, a restaurant is here. I have heard, I've got no proof, but I've heard opened by a Southerner who called it the Stonewall for Stonewall Jackson because across the street is the statue of Philip Sheridan, the Union Army general. We've got a clash across Christopher Street.
Where are we now?
Right now, we're on 7th Avenue South at Christopher and West 4th. This neighborhood was developed before the 1811 grid plan. A lot of people come to New York and feel very comfortable in New York because you have 1st, 2nd, 3rd Avenue, streets go 51, 52, 53, but below Houston Street, and this little pocket here of Greenwich Village is before that grid was laid out in 1811. It was a separate area. In fact, in this neighborhood, West 4th Street crosses West 10th Street, and that throws people off all the time.
Yes.
But this is where we can see the destruction of the neighborhood as a quiet village. In 1914, the city of New York, through eminent domain, extended 7th Avenue from 14th Street all the way down to make way for the subway line. And what ends up happening is they cut buildings in half, they clear them out, the street is perfectly rounded because underneath is the subway, and all these beautiful narrow 19th century streets are ripped apart by now a 4-lane avenue.
Oh.
My favorite part about this is we're in front of Village Cigar. Village Cigar has a little tiny triangle in front of it that says this piece of land was never used for public purpose because the Hess family refused to give up their land. The little piece of land, it's literally a tiny triangle,
Yeah.
was later sold to Village Cigar for about $1,000, and they kept it with the little property marker and some nice little tile inlay.
I love it.
It's great.
What next?
What's next is one of the great American patriots where he lived and died.
Great,
This one.
let's go.
This is what Big Onion is all about. The layer upon layer of history in single sites such as this.
So where are we exactly?
We are at Marie's Crisis Cafe. Today, a piano bar. Why is it called Marie's Crisis Cafe? Because in the 1920s, during Prohibition, Romany Marie had a European tea parlor here. Now, a European tea parlor was a nice way of saying a speakeasy. All the newest teas from Europe. In reality, it was liquor. There were dozens of speakeasies in this neighborhood, all under different names. This one was pretty much right here in the open. Now, it's called the Crisis Cafe because it's here that in 1809, the great writer and patriot Thomas Paine died. He writes The Crisis. He writes many of these early 1776 writings that gets Americans charged up to free ourselves from the British. He goes to France to take part in the French Revolution. He is too radical for the French. He is really not allowed back home in Britain. He ends up here, penniless, broken, forgotten, dies in this house owned by a friend of his. And he was the great voice that got the summer farmer to pick up a gun and fight against the British.
Wow. Anything else?
Let's take a walk.
Seth, if you could live anywhere in the village, where would you live?
I would live on Grove Court,
Why?
behind this gate. I think pictures, do more than my words ever could. But these 19th century workers' housing, built on a weird triangular piece of land, is probably one of the quietest, most serene, and for me, most beautiful parts of Greenwich Village. Each private home is 3 windows wide, 3 stories tall. It's just, for me, this is urban bliss right here behind this gate.
It's beautiful.
It is, and most people never even see it, don't know it's here. Lots of tourists just walk right by. And when you're in New York, you've gotta be a tourist. You have to look around. It's okay to look up. It's okay to look people in the eye. Otherwise, you're gonna miss things like this.
That's what I love about your tour, Seth, that you really get in the nooks and crannies. And so this is my second tour with you. I want to thank you so much for showing me the village.
It's absolutely been my pleasure. And this has just been part of what is really a 2-hour tour exploring the entire West Village neighborhood.
Great. For visitors who come to New York, how can they find you?
Our website is bigonion.com, and we are the only group in New York that sets a tour calendar months in advance. In the winter, we're out here 5 days a week. The rest of the year, 7 days a week, multiple tours a day. We don't require reservations for most of our walks. You just look at what we're doing, show up in the meeting site, and off we go.
Well, thank you so much, Seth.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
So Jet Setters, there you have it. Find them online. Thank you so much and safe travels.